like up
Good
there
morning.
where there's no lockdowns, hardly ever. It must be a wonderful way to live.
Look, we're not locked down, and I can tell you how much sympathy there is for people in New South Wales at the moment around Queensland, but there's still symptoms that are flowing over to this side of the border that are the product of the breakout in Sydney, and with hard borders having been set up to Queensland, there's economic consequences and social consequences that come with that. Nothing of the magnitude that's being experienced in Sydney, of course, but even 1,000 kilometres away at the border with Queensland, we do see some of the product of what's going on down south.
Yeah, the Prime Minister now says that lockdowns, he wants them to be a thing of the past by Christmas. Are you that confident, bearing in mind that it's the Premiers who call the shots?
There is a real tension between the fact that it is Premiers who are responsible for the public health response, and yet the federal government that bears the economic and fiscal brunt of what occurs. And it's played out quite harshly here in Queensland, where state governments are incentivised to be quite draconian in circumstances where they aren't responsible for or don't accept responsibility for the economic consequences of what they do. That said, we know the key to getting life as close to back to normal as we can is vaccination. And now that we have 1 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine reaching our shores every week, the vaccination program has ramped up so that we're now vaccinating putting into arms 1 million doses every 6 days. We will reach the point where we can gradually open up our economy before the end of the year. But, you know, everything we can do to make that sooner will make an enormous difference. I was talking to a business owner of a nationally recognised retail brand just yesterday, and he was saying his takings in the Sydney area are, depending on the store, down between 65 and 83%. That is not a sustainable rate at which to operate, and that means that the flow-on consequences for jobs will be very real for every week that this lockdown extends. You've
got the increased disaster payments that were announced yesterday. One sector, though, that is going to need more help ultimately is tourism once again. And you've got a lot of businesses, especially in Queensland too, southeast Queensland, far north Queensland, etc., that rely on travellers who would be coming from Sydney, from areas that are locked down at the moment. So more is going to be needed for those businesses, isn't there?
Look, I do think there is an enormous impact on places like the Gold Coast, the Sunshine Coast, Cairns, places that had already taken 40% of their visitors off the books by the end of international travel, and now to find that people aren't able to move within the country makes life harder for them again. But we should remember, well, two things. This country was never meant to be divided by internal borders. The framers of our Constitution, the people who established the nation that we have now, never intended for this country to put up concrete walls within our island boundaries. And that's particularly stark when we think about the way that the evidence for the effectiveness of hard internal borders is pretty scant. The other thing to notice is that it isn't just tourism that suffers. You know, Freeman's Organic Farms in the Currumbin Valley came out earlier this week and said they're in dire straits, and the owner, who has been doing this for generations, his family, they've been going for 100 years, he's now paying staff using his army pension because the closure of the border makes it so hard for him to do his trade, which is a blend of agriculture and tourism. So the ripple effects are quite significant.